The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make the louder noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave. Are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat of our row. There will be a perfect pickup. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride on this Thursday, August 3rd. Friday, August 4th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. Hope you had a great day. We are live right now in the Great White North on top of the mountains of Central and smoky British Columbia, as we are here 7 days a week. Let's welcome in everyone listening in on our terrestrial stations, WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans at over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music? Get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of Spaced Out Radio. Now, we're all over social media, so to follow us, you got to get in line with us. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. We're also on iHeartRadio. Tune in. Download our shows from iTunes, Player.fm, RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and Stitcher. Our website is SpacedOutRadio.com. Now, if you want to help out this show, all you got to do is go to Patreon.com, and for as low as $1 a month, you get all these free shows. We need $1. Head to Patreon.com to donate $1 today. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on our website by clicking Listen Live, go on Revolution Radio, Spreaker, UPRN's chat room, or if you're on Facebook, the SOR Space Travelers Club, or if you're on Twitter, be like Andrew, be like Canadian Joe. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. Now, for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler member. You can also head to our store, pick up a t-shirt, poster, stickers, read The Encounter online, courtesy of our editors Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer, read up on my latest blog, and if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. We got some great video footage as well on there from Tim Doyle and UFO Seekers and Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV. Tonight we fly the friendly skies around the world, but are we searching for E.T. or our own? That's the big question as we have Olav Phillips back on the show for the second time in the year. Olav is one of the premier voices and researchers when it comes to the secret space program. We all know there are secret projects going on, but do we know what's flying? Really, did any of us really believe that when the U.S. government retired the famed SR-71, that they were just replacing it with satellites to do their spying? This is where the names like the Aurora program and TR-3Bs have become synonymous with this secret program. Are we flying into space? Do we have bases on the moon, Mars, or even Titan? Olav is the author of The Secret Space Age, published by the Adventure Unlimited Press, as well as being a regular contributor to Paranoia Magazine and Steam Shovel Press. Olav, my friend, all the way from California, how you doing? Good to have you back on the air.
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
You know, I'm not doing too bad. Today has been a very, very tough day of breathing for me because the forest fires around here just south of us, well, all the winds shifted to the north and northeast. And literally, I have been sitting in a ash snow, if we can call it that, ash snow, you know, for literally all day since I woke up, and it looks horrible outside. It really does. It's been a tough day for breathing all around.
You know, it's interesting. As I was following your posts on Facebook about the fire, it actually reminded me of an experience that I had with a forest fire. Back in the day when I was,
Absolutely, fill us in.
Okay, back in the day when I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout, and I actually am an Eagle Scout, but I was a Life Scout back then. But I worked in a camp up in the Sierras called Wolfboro. And it's a very interesting camp, and they have some very interesting stories that, you know, campfire stories that are fascinating to tell and whatever. But I actually worked there. I was a merit badge counselor. I taught like camping, wilderness survival, and yada yada. Yeah, and so one of my other responsibilities was that we were very isolated. We had a radio, no telephone. All of our power was generator, and we got our water out of the river using a pump and a filtration system. So that being said, we're at the bottom of a valley. So if there are any kind of fires, right, then we had to deal with it ourselves. So we had a volunteer fire brigade, I guess you'd call us. and I'm a fairly big guy. I'm like 6'3", and so I was one of those fire people. And I had a fire suit like you'd see with the forestry guys. I had the forestry fire helmet. I had an axe and the whole thing. And we had the emergency shelter. There's like a emergency tent that you can pull over yourself so that the fire goes past you. You'll be shielded inside the tent and it'll just blow past you. Well, that's all fine and good. And, you know, we would practice. We'd go out and clear brush and cut down trees and whatever. But you don't really think to yourself, well, there's going to be a fire. I mean, we had a guy who didn't know what he was doing who blew up a propane stove. But, you know, that was pretty straightforward, you know. Get out there with a fire extinguisher, put it out, calm the kids down, everything's cool, right? Well, somebody had a campfire that went out of control about 20 miles away from us, and it started a forest fire, a very big forest fire. I don't think it was as big as what you've experienced, but it was a very big forest fire, and it was coming our way. And so I'm sleeping, and, you know, for days we had seen the fire on the horizon, so to speak. We could see it down the valley, and it would turn the night, it would turn it like red, like blood, and it cast this like wicked red kind of haze on everything. And then the you know, obviously the sky was really clouded up, and during the day the sun trying to pass through the clouds and made everything kind of orange. These are probably things you've experienced, I'm sure. And so one day we get a frantic call on the radio from the Forest Service, and they told us that the fire was coming our direction. And so we had contingency plans in place. And so we had to move all the kids to the other side of the river because we used the river as a fire break, because it was a sufficiently wide river that it should stop the fire theoretically. But, you know, suddenly in the middle of the night, you know, the siren goes on, right? And it's like, oh crap, you know, I spent like, 3 weeks practicing to be a amateur firefighter. Now I've actually got to go do it. So we put on all our gear, and, you know, it's heavy. It's like really heavy. We're running out there, and we had to stand in a line, and we could see the fire like a couple miles away, and we had to like stand in a line, and we're just standing there waiting to go. And all we had to do, they would tell us when, and we start cutting down trees as fast as we can, build a fire break, yada yada. But at 17 years old, I'm a couple miles from that fire, and I'm looking right at it through the forest, and the whole place is like cascaded in this like eerie red. You know, I thought I was in hell. And after the fire kind of shifted, we didn't have to do anything, luckily. But after the fire shifted, that's when the ash snow, as you call it, started to rain down.
Yes. And
it just covers everything. You can't breathe. And then it rained, because the forest fire in general, creates its own kind of atmospheric anomaly. So we actually had like thunderstorms and rain. And so the rain got on top of the ash and made it this like gray goo that was like everywhere.
Well, I was within.
Scary.
I can see that, and that, you know, hearing that story, it freaks me out. I was within 2.5, 3 miles of losing my house, and the only thing that saved the 400 or 500 houses in my area was the fact that the wind decided to do a 180 out of nowhere. And the people who were battling the fire, the people who were battling the fire did not expect that to happen. They expected to lose the entire ranch area where I am. And I'll tell you, I am so sick of campfire smoke. I hope and pray that, you know, the crappy part about it is I've got a great big fire pit in my backyard. And even after this year is over, I don't even want to use it. I'm just tired Just tired of it.
You know, after that, I didn't want to see a campfire for like months.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're looking through it and you see the fire. I mean, and the way fire behaves is very weird, you know, but you see the fire and it's so surreal. You just don't want to ever see that again. And actually, it's funny, a couple of years ago, near where I live, we have a big mountain. I live in like a valley, and there's this huge mountain. And it's called Mount Diablo, the Mountain of the Devil. And it caught on fire on the backside. And the fire was so severe that I had my binoculars. I have some, obviously, given my hobbies, I have some very powerful binoculars. And I'm sitting out there and I'm watching it, and I could actually see the flames shooting up over the top of the mountain. And it's like you have these experiences, you know, that you really don't want to deal with it.
You know, yesterday I'm sitting in my daytime office and just staring. The sky is bright blue. And then all of a sudden in the distance, and you know it's only 25 miles away, you see the plume starting. And it's growing, and it's growing, and it's growing.
And coming towards you.
And you think, oh my goodness, here we go again. You know, and living on this heightened sense of tension is terrible.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's tiring.
It is, and you don't sleep well, and you're waiting for the sirens or the knock at the door. You're waiting for the flare-ups to happen, but you know what? We're getting through it. We'll end up getting through it, you know, but I wouldn't move, you know. I love where I live, you know, so, I mean, I'm good with where I am right now, you know, and thankfully my house is safe, and if we got to go again, we got to go again. And, you know, I was talking to one of my spiritual friends yesterday about it because since I got back, I felt like, yeah, we're going to have to leave again. And talking with one of my spiritual friends, she goes, you know, I really think that we're going to have to be evacuated again. And I was like, oh, there's my confirmation that I didn't want. You can feel it. Yeah, you can
feel it. Yeah.
You can feel it. And so we'll see what happens. Next time I'm going north. Next time I'm going north. I went south last time and didn't work out too well, so I'm going north. All right, let's
go up to Whitehorse.
That's where the wife is from. So that's about from where I am. I'm closer to you than I am to Whitehorse. Yeah. You're about a 23-hour drive or 20-hour drive for me, and Whitehorse is about 24 to 27 hours.
It's beautiful, though.
I know. I've never been.
Land of the Midnight Sun. Oh, Land of the Midnight Sun, man.
Yes.
It's surreal.
My wife was telling me how she used to have black curtains in her room so as a kid she could sleep because of the midnight sun.
Yeah, when I went, you know, 3 a.m. was kind of like twilight. And we you know, the motel, there's not really hotels there, at least when I went. But you know, they had these really thick, like, blackout curtains.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah. So you can sleep. It's strange, but it's beautiful. It's weird. It's very weird.
I just want to mention this.
Anyway,
Jeff at hashtag Spaced Out Radio posted a picture on Twitter that basically shows a picture of a piece of land with a giant moat around it. And he says, Dave just needs to dig a moat. Let me tell you this fire that's burning south of us right now, it's literally surpassed the size of 90,000 football fields. So it's about 89,000 hectares, and so that's about 90,000 football fields. Just to give you the equivalent, it's already jumped 2 rivers. It's burning so hot. It's jumped two rivers and the highway. So,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. But you know what? We're going to continue on. We're going to
talk about the secret space program.
Absolutely. Normally I don't get to questions. Exactly. Normally I don't get to questions right off the bat. But Joe down in California, he lives near Beale Air Force Base. So we're going to talk about some. We're going to talk about some military aircraft here for a minute because I'm a huge military aircraft buff. And he is asking,
Me too.
Why do they still fly the U-2 if they have all these damn satellites and a secret space program?
Well, the secret space program is obviously secret, supposedly, right? So they can't talk about it. You know, I think I've wondered that for a long time, because Beale is actually one of the main U2 bases, and it's really antiquated technology. And basically, a U2 is like a glider. And I for the life of me, I can't figure it out other than they retired the SR-71 without announcing the replacement. And I think that it provides a cover for whatever they're actually doing. You know, that if you, it would be kind of like, you know, the B-52, right, is our backbone bomber. And if one day the Air Force said, okay, you know, we're going to get rid of all the B-52s, and there's no replacement, everybody's going to stand around and go, well, you got rid of all the B-52s, what are you going to do? You know, so I think that they still fly the U-2s more for cover than anything else. Plus, you know, they're a known quantity, you know, but I definitely don't think that most of our surveillance comes from U-2 overflights. Satellites are a different problem. I saw back in the 80s, I saw a very good representation of the capabilities of a keyhole satellite. That's a surveillance satellite. Back in the 80s, they showed a picture that was a simulation taken from a keyhole satellite in orbit, and it showed like the Western Hemisphere, and then it kind of went down into like North America, and then it kept zooming down photo by photo. It took like 12 photos to do this. And at the end, it showed a guy laying on a hammock with a copy of War and Peace on his chest. He was sleeping, and you could read the cover. And that's from orbit. So they're very powerful. The problem is that they're on known trajectories, right? So, for example, like at Area 51, there's a guy named T.D. Barnes who is a stealth engineer at Area 51. And he'll tell you stories about how they knew when the Soviet satellites would come over. And so what they would do is they'd work on something for, say, I'm probably going to get the timings wrong, but let's say, you know, it's every 90 minutes, right? So they'd work on something for an hour, right? And then they would have to stop, and then they had like 15 minutes to get it back into the hangar. And then they had, 15 minutes to get themselves out of the way. And if they didn't quite make the 90-minute curve when the thing's coming back over, they would have to throw a tarp over whatever they were working on, and then they would have to lay face down on the ground so that when the satellite came over, it wouldn't, you couldn't see it. So, even though these satellites are very powerful, when you're trying to take photos of something like Kapustin Yar, which is one of the secret test facilities in Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, they know when our satellites are coming overhead, so they will take all their stuff and put it into hangars or into Quonset huts, or they'll cover them with tarps, and so it's not very useful, right? So you still need an aircraft, because the aircraft can fly at irregular times, and it can overfly the surveillance target without them knowing in some cases, or without them being able to cover up what they're doing, right? But what you can see with a satellite is big stuff that you can't cover up. Like, let's say that you're testing a ballistic missile. You're going to drive the truck out, and then you're going to raise the missile, and you've got to connect all the. People think that it's like a truck that just drives out somewhere, and they put down some spikes, lift the missile up, and fire it. And it's actually, there's a generator truck, and there's a comm truck, and there's a radar truck, and all these different trucks, and so you got to set everything up. You can't exactly cover that up very well. So satellites are great for that kind of stuff. They're great for like big things, like during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they were building. There's an anti-aircraft design that looks like a Star of David, and on the points you put like anti-aircraft missiles, and then in the center you put the ballistic missile. So we could see the Soviets building this pattern on the ground and lifting the missiles into place. You can't really cover that up, so a satellite is great for that. Or if you want it at a certain time, you can fly over it. But I don't know why they still fly U-2s. The U-2s are antiquated technology, so the only thing I can think of is that it's PR.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking is
So they
everybody
supposedly retard them.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm thinking. Everybody knows the U-2 is still there, much like you mentioned the B-52.
Oh, yeah.
And, you just don't retire an aircraft like the SR-71, which retired, I believe, in 1992, without having... And the SR-71 wasn't even antiquated. It wasn't even past its prime when they shut the program down. Even though the aircraft was 35 years old. But, you don't retire something...
They keep updating them.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. But you just don't retire that aircraft without having anything in return. And as the 80s went into the 90s, this is where these... Every final Thursday of the month, seemed to be these earthquakes coming out of Nellis Air Force Range heading towards Los Angeles of about 1 to 1.4 on the Richter scale. This is what people believe was the Aurora program. And I'm curious, do you believe that the Aurora is what took over from the SR-71?
I think it did for a period of time, and supposedly there was an Aurora squadron at Beale for a period of time. I saw an Aurora. I've actually seen an Aurora for sure once. Well, as for sure as you can be, right? But for sure once and possibly twice. And so I think they're still being flown, but I think they have more exotic aircraft now that are being utilized. But definitely I think the Aurora back in the 80s and the 90s took over. And when they were experiencing those earthquakes going out toward Los Angeles, I actually knew a guy who claimed that he was up in the hills above LA, and he saw one of these things streak, because it's like a streak. They're so fast. He saw this thing streak across the sky, and then as it went across, he felt the rumbling, and then he could see a power failure across the LA basin and follow it. So, I think the Aurora definitely took over for a period of time, but I think that they actually have better stuff now. And there's actually a really interesting incident that happened along the Russian frontier with a Russian pilot that I think he saw one of these things, the new ones.
You know what was interesting? And recently I saw a map where they would take off towards the Pacific Ocean, which would go out just north or south of LA, and then they would head straight north along the coastline, which would pass British Columbia and Vancouver Island. I was living on Vancouver Island when I first, and this was about I started my radio career in 1998, and living on Vancouver Island, there's a lot of beautiful sunsets on the ocean. There really is. And I had just learned about the Aurora program at that time. And I remember watching this documentary where it said with the Aurora, the way it was, people were feeling this was the Aurora program, is the contrail looked like an old telephone cord that you would see, in that curly way that telephone cords are created. And I thought nothing
on a rope.
Yeah. And I thought nothing of it. And one day, my ex-wife and I, we were driving north in the summertime, and beautiful sunset, and looking north to the, just looking up in the sky, and here is this contrail that is all starting to spread out, but it is all in that telephone cord curling. And I kind of remember saying to myself, holy cow. Is that an Aurora program? And it wasn't until just a couple of weeks ago when I was just kind of looking at the Secret Space program on YouTube, some videos, where they actually showed what they perceive is the flight pattern of this aircraft, which would, once again, leave Nevada, go over California, straight up the coastline, over top of Vancouver Island, and then eventually make its way over Russia through the Arctic.
Right.
And so,
well, when I saw it, I actually saw it in southern Washington. I went to ECETI, and I was obviously looking at Mount Adams, which is what everybody does when they're at ECETI. But I turned around, and it came out of the southeast toward where Nellis would be. It came out of the southeast and then turned west. And, it was a series of flashes. It was like flash, 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 flash across the sky. And those flashes are what produced the circular contrail circular component of the contrail. And because it uses something called a pulse detonation drive, basically it pulses explosions and pushes the aircraft forward. But I saw it streak across the sky going west, and it was the damnedest thing I've seen. I've seen that twice.
Now, there was a gentleman who, I believe in Iceland, who worked for the British military as a researcher on aircraft coming across the ocean, and I guess he worked stationed on an oil rig or something along those lines. And he swears that I think this was around 1989, that they watched a low-level in-flight refueling of the Aurora aircraft. So for people who don't know what the Aurora is, could you describe what it looked like?
Well, there's some conjecture about it, but basically it's kind of like a long, elongated triangle. That's one of the designs of it. And then it has two tail fins, and supposedly that there's a laser that runs between the tail fins, and the fuel is pushed through some sort of a nozzle out between the fins, and then it hits the laser and ignites, and that's what causes the popping. But it basically looks like an elongated triangle. That's one of the main designs of it. And it's a very kind of weird thing. I mean, from the Aurora on, after the SR-71, a lot of the aircraft designs that you see, or the photos that people will catch, they all seem to be triangular. Yeah, they're all somewhat triangular in shape. So the Aurora is supposedly also triangular.
What is with the triangle shape that all of the secret space program or secret aircraft seem to be having, Olav? Why the triangle?
I think it has to do with the radar signature, that they can manipulate the radar signature. The triangular shape has some sort of a benefit to them manipulating the radar signature. Basically, with a lot of these aircraft, these stealth aircraft, that you see that there's a lot of like long, like flat portions and in kind of weird shapes. And what those do is they actually reduce the footprint of the object, so that when it's pinged by active radar, that what comes back is smaller than what is actually there, because it can deflect the radar signal so that it appears. I want to say like the stealth fighter, that they got it down to be like the size of a duck or something ridiculous like that. But they, by shaping it the way they do, and I think the triangular shape has a benefit to that. But I'm not a stealth engineer, but I'm pretty sure it does. It makes it harder to detect, basically. Mm-hmm. So the stealth fighter, even the B-2 bomber, it's a wing, but it still has a kind of triangular shape, even though it's like a wing, like a wedge.
And that is obviously to bounce any type of radar technology off of it. The stealth.
Yeah,
issue.
And then they also coat it in special materials that are radar absorbent, so when the radar pulse hits the thing, that's actually absorbed, so that it doesn't return a signature, so that again it appears to be smaller. The idea is that when you have your anti-aircraft missile radar sweeping the sky looking for a target, that it's so small that it ignores it, or it can't get a lock onto it because it's fading in and fading out, that the signal isn't strong enough for them to get a radar lock so that they can fire a missile at it. Because that was the problem with the U-2, right? That U-2 was slow. The genesis of this is the U-2. The U-2 was super slow, and it was big and lumbering, right? And the benefit of the U-2 is that it flew so high that the Soviets at the time didn't have a missile anti-aircraft missile that was multi-stage that could get to it. So they'd fire a missile, and the missile would run out of fuel before it could get to the altitude. Well, the Soviets figured this out, so they built a bigger missile, right? That's how this works, you know. You build a bigger missile, they can fly further. And when they got that working, the next one that flew over was Francis Gary Powers. They fired the missile, they hit the plane, you know, and then the rest is history. You know, he ejected, plane didn't get destroyed, yada yada. But the idea is with these new ones is that they fly so high so fast that you can't get any kind of a lock on. And like I said, there was a very interesting incident that happened with a Russian pilot out on the frontier, and he saw some sort of weird triangular shaped object that he could not lock onto, and he tried to chase it, and it was just too fast. I think he was in a SU-31, and he kept trying to chase it, and he couldn't. You know, they could see it, they could detect that there was something there, but they couldn't get a shape or a size. He could visually see it, and he kept chasing it, and it kept climbing in altitude. He's climbing in altitude. He's radioing back, but eventually he just couldn't catch it. And I think that was probably one of these next generation, probably like a 5th generation surveillance aircraft, probably a drone.
So were a lot of these new aircraft that are being built now all unmanned, or are we still training pilots for these secret programs?
I think we're still training pilots. I mean, the Aurora supposedly had a pilot and a co-pilot / photo operator, like an operator that handles all the cameras and stuff. I think there are certain ones though that are unmanned. But I mean, unmanned is kind of a tricky thing. That, you know, you say they're unmanned, but there's still a guy sitting in a trailer somewhere flying it. But I think that they're more. There are some that are unmanned now that are smaller, but I do believe that there are ones that are still manned by people, especially considering that some of the newer ones are multi-purpose. So not only do they have the cameras that can take the photos and do all that, but they also have like weapons payloads. Like the Aurora supposedly had a bomb bay that it could fire a cruise missile from. So if you're gonna arm it, you know, especially something that can carry something nuclear, you know, you're gonna have people on it generally.
That's a lot of billions of dollars to go through,
you know,
in order to try and gain the secrets.
Yeah, but you know, I heard a story that was really funny. Back in the 50s, us and the Canadians, we were mortified that the Soviets were going to bomb us, right? And so they undertook this program called the Nike program. And the Nike, they put these missiles, these multi-stage anti-aircraft missiles, all over the place. I think there were like 500 Nike sites scattered across the United States and Canada. And they went through like 3 generations of Nike. There was the Nike Atlas, the Nike Hercules, and the Nike Zeus. And each one was like a successively further range, right? That the Nike Atlas could go like 27 miles, and then you got up to the Nike Hercules, and it could do like 200 or 300 miles, and then you got to the Zeus, and it could do like 500 and something miles. Well, the whole program, with all these installations all over the place and all the radar equipment and everything else, they figured out that it was like hundreds of billions of dollars in today's dollars just to potentially stop bombers. So obviously you're going to spend more to stop bombers, but you know, when it comes to defense budgets, I mean, really, you know, the sky's the limit at what they're willing to spend to get the data that they want. Because, you know, it's national security, right? You know, I mean, you know, you being Canadian, you know, the Canadians and the Americans, you know, we have a joint defense pact. So, you know, a lot of these things that we're doing, we do together. I mean, like NORAD is a multi-regional. So there's Canadians in there. There's Americans in some of your facilities like NORAD. So, you know, the Canadians and the Americans, I mean, they spend just tremendous amounts of money trying to do photo surveillance and trying to do defense. They don't really, we have budgets, but those budgets are really what you see, like when you see like the Canadian defense budget or the American defense budget, that's just the tip of the iceberg because of the special access programs. So, you know, a lot of the money for the special access programs for like the Aurora and others, the TR-3B and some of the other aircraft, you know, they're hidden, you know, in these special access programs. And it's interesting that, you know, back in the 80s, there was a big to-do about, you know, like XYZ defense contractor charging like $300 for a hammer. Well, what it turned out was the belief is that while they were charging $300 for a $5 hammer, what they were doing is taking the other $295 and putting it into a secret access program.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
What do you
In fact, we only know about the Aurora. Well, we only know about the Aurora because somebody screwed up and actually put it in the Air Force budget. That in the R&D section of the Air Force budget, there's this huge wad of cash, and it said Aurora program. And that's how we knew that it existed.
When did that happen?
It happened in the 90s, I think.
And just some journalists just happened to be checking the defense budgets and saw that, and that's how it came out?
Yeah, well, guys like Jane's Defense Weekly and some of the others, you know, when those budgets come out, they tear through them. There are a lot of people that when the defense budgets come out, they tear through it looking for stuff. You know, Aerospace and Defense Weekly and Jane's. Well, Aerospace Defense Weekly they have a very interesting relationship, but Jane's and some of the others, they actually have analysts that will tear apart the budgets looking for things.
So when this came out, what was the government's reaction to the Aurora and where that money was going?
Well, I mean, in general, you know, for secret programs, the government has a kind of denial first mentality, and I think that that's probably, you know, beneficial. I mean, you know, I may enjoy weird planes, and you know, I may be into the secret space program and conspiracy stuff, but I very much do believe that some secrets are you know, should be kept, especially around our national defense, because, you know, there are foreign actors out there that really don't like us. And, you know, we need to be able to defend ourselves as a nation and with the Canadians, obviously, as a region, right? But, you know, that being said, what they'll do is you'll get some busybody reporter who will go to the Air Force and say, well, you know, I saw this Aurora program thing. What is it? And they'll say, well, it's classified. Well, what does it involve? Well, it's classified. Well, can I file a FOIA request? Yeah, sure, but it's still classified. They just won't tell you anything. Because to tell you anything at all, to deny it, right, is even if you deny it, then there's a certain cachet to denying that something exists. So they won't deny it. They won't acknowledge it. They won't do anything. A lot of times they won't say anything at all. They'll just ignore you.
That is frustrating. That is totally frustrating. Milo has a question for you. He says, we know they have reverse engineered, even done MyLab abductions. Have they had a secret base in Antarctica where they have motherships the size to reverse technology? Milo, you got to print better than that, man. I'm trying to read this cold.
I think I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't think that we have a base in Antarctica other than McMurdo. You know, the one that everybody knows about McMurdo, right? You know, it's the big Antarctic, you know, science station. I don't think that we have a base down there for that kind of stuff. I think we just launch that stuff from the continental United States or from Guam, or, you know, we have plenty of places where we can launch this stuff and nobody would ever see it. I mean, if you think about Area 51, right? They chose Area 51 for a reason. That when you take off from Area 51, if you cut north, there's not a whole lot out there. You know, you may have a few people on in an RV along, you know, the highway that might see something streak out across the sky, but in general, you know, there's not a lot out there. And there are facilities up toward the Arctic Circle that are, you know, in Canada where they launch this stuff from too. You know, I've heard that there's a rather large base at Yellowknife where they've launched weird stuff from on occasion. So, you know, they launch this stuff from places where there aren't a lot of people, and there's probably more moose than there are people, or more rattlesnakes than people. So I don't think we really need need an Antarctic base. The Antarctic base more comes out of the Antarctic survival mythos from the Germans, that they had built a base down there called Base 211, and that they had launched a series of flying saucers from there to go somewhere else. The Hounaboo or whatever, the Vril and the Hounaboo, most of the Hounaboo. But the Base 211 was like where a lot of the Nazi elite had gone to try to maintain the Fourth Reich, and they had lived down there. And there are people that they claim that there was a rather large installation that's probably abandoned now.
Well, I know up in Alberta they have a base called CFB Cold Lake, or Canadian Forces Base Cold Lake, and they have a large testing site. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people in the United States believe Nellis Air Force Range is massive. Now, if you multiply Nellis by about 10 to 20, that's the size of CFB Cold Lake. It is massive.
Right. And it's massive. And China Lake, too, is quite enormous. And, you know, all these installations have one thing in common. They're all places where there aren't a whole lot of people. You know, and we have a mutual defense pact. So if we want to fly stuff out of this Canadian facility, we probably do. I wouldn't put it past us at all.
In the 80s, when the cruise missile was becoming very popular and they were testing the cruise missile, they were actually doing that in Cold Lake because they were getting Canadian CF-18s to actually try and intercept the cruise missiles, you know, on their test runs. So it was very interesting because Canada, being a peacekeeping country at that time, you know, before all hell broke loose after September 11th, you know, we really didn't like the idea of nuclear weapons here, and Canada is very proud to be a nuclear-free zone for when it comes to weapons and weaponry. So the people around the area got very, very steamed about those cruise missiles, but I mean, that's just what's come out. You know, that's just what's come out.
Exactly. Right, and it shows you that we were testing cruise missiles in a Canadian facility. And the reason why they would use the CF-18 is because the CF-18 is an F-18 with a C on it. You know, we have a long history of the Canadian Air Force, you know, flying the same stuff that we do. They just put a C on it. You know, the F-87 or the F-86 Sabre, the old, you know, Korean War era, beautiful plane, but apparently somewhat unstable. You know, I went to Edmonton, and there was a airplane museum in Edmonton, and they had a CF-86, and you know, you look at the F-86 versus the CF-86, the only difference is it had a maple leaf on it, and the name had a C. You know, we did the same thing with the F-102 and, you know, F-104 and all these.
Absolutely. Yeah. And but the problem is what happened to the Canadian military at that time. In the 1960s, our Prime Minister, John Diefenbaker, scratched and ripped up a very, very intricate program called the Avro program, where the Avro arrow, shaped like an old F1, if you're an American and a military buff, like an F-106 Delta Dart. That's kind of what it looked like. And this aircraft was so ahead of its time, and we ended up scrapping that, literally throwing the parts in Lake Ontario to buy a bunch of used CF-101 Voodoos, you know, and that's what killed the entire Canadian aviation industry. And to this day, we're 50 years later, and to this day, it is something that still haunts Canada for our own military and our own aviation industry, because literally there were only 2 Avro arrows built, and they were breaking. I mean, at that time, to get a jet to go 2.5 or 2.8 Mach was unheard of. It was unheard of, but that's the type of technology that they were building. And then eventually, from what I understand, don't exacted as proof, but from what I understand, they took a lot of those designers and hired them at places like NASA, McDonnell Douglas, Grumman, Boeing. Lockheed Martin, exactly. So that's where a lot of those technologists went after they were graciously bowed out by the Canadian government. So we have become extremely reliant on United States technology, except for our snipers, which now seem to be doing much better than yours. 3.1 miles, people. 3.1 miles.
Yeah, right. But even ships, a lot of ships, they buy old stuff from us, and it very much, there used to be a lot of jokes back in the 80s about Canada versus America and whatever, but as time has gone on, at least from a defense point of view, I think that they're separate, but I think there's a lot of merging, right?
Absolutely.
I think that, they say when I lived in England, they used to say that in England, if America has a cold, England sneezes. I think that's actually more, probably more true of Canada. Because a lot of, the Canadians are not going to do anything without telling us. And frankly, we're not going to do anything without telling the Canadians, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
so,
in the end, we do have to live here together. And it's easier to work together than apart. And as much as a certain, unicorn prime minister that we have and a blustery president that you have, I don't see them getting together for tea and crumpets. That's for sure.
No, I love crumpets. So. But the other thing to remember is that we have a huge border that is large portions of it are really unmanageable, right? That there are huge portions of you look at Mexico, and then as our president likes to say, well, I'm going to build a wall, and theoretically you probably could, but between us and Canada, that would be a very much harder thing to do because of the topology. It's just non-manageable. So, we really do have to have a lot of trust between our two countries.
Absolutely, and it is fun. It is absolutely fun. And thank you, Canadian Joe at #SpacedOutRadio for tagging in a picture of the Avro Arrow. Beautiful aircraft for back in the day. Beautiful.
Well, and it's important to point out that Avro, the Avro, when they built the discs, the project ultimately failed. But when they built the discs, those were tested by the U.S. Air Force.
Well,
so it was a Canadian company that was testing, with the U.S. Air Force.
And I just actually remembered this. There is video in the 50s, colored video from the 1950s, early 60s, of American and Canadian scientists testing out disc-like aircraft at Cold Lake,
right?
Which we would consider a flying saucer.
Yeah, it looks exactly like a flying saucer. Had a little pod in the front, but the front is circular, but the quote-unquote front, the pilot sat in, but it had stability problems. So when you see those old videos, when they get high, the thing starts to wobble around. They couldn't really conquer that.
I do have to get to Gail's question. This one's more for me, though. She says, I have a feeling this might offend, so Canadians plug your ears. Isn't it kind of disingenuous to be proud of being bomb-free when your bro to the south can kick anyone's butt who threatens either of us? Exactly. But that's why our defense also pays a lot for NORAD. And number two...
Oh, yes.
And number two, the only real fight we have besides our snipers that are better than yours is we know how to just drop the gloves and go. It's just simpler that way. And then afterwards, we'll pat each other on the head and say, good game, and go sit in the penalty box for 5 minutes and be proud of it. That's the way it works.
Well, the other thing you have to remember is that when you think about that mutual defense pact, is that although, the Canadians are more reliant on us from a nuclear point of view, we have plenty of nuclear weapons, right? I mean, we still have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the Earth at least 100 times. And not only does Canada pay a tremendous amount of money, because you think about the gross national product of Canada, the population's much smaller, the gross national product of Canada is smaller, they're paying a tremendous amount of money into this mutual defense pact. And frankly, they have to deal with us a lot, because especially in the 50s and the 60s, and it waned in the 70s, but we were putting radar domes all over Canada. And it wasn't the kind of situation where the Canadians could particularly say no. When we had the DO line, we went to the Canadians and said, okay, our map says we need to put a dome here, here, and here. The Canadians pretty much had to say, okay. So it's, the Canadians give up too. It's not like we just take care of everything. It's like there's a mutualness in it.
Mm-hmm. Olav, I'm going to get you to hold on here, because we're going to end up hopping out for a break here momentarily on Spaced Out Radio. Olav Phillips is our guest tonight. We're talking secret space programs, secret aircraft, and everything covert. Olav is fantastic in his research with this. He's going to be with us the distance tonight, so stay on tuned. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with hour number 2 right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays. spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, it's the first Friday of the month, which means our Keith Andrews will be back with the ET Connection, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Pantochronometer. Pantochronometer is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with us live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. You can also listen to us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot. Join the SOR Space Travelers Club for as low as $5 a month. Read my blog on the Encounter online, put together by Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham. And we have our Spaced Out Radio store. T-shirts, posters, stickers, up for grabs for you. Tonight we are talking secret space program and secret spy planes. Olav Phillips is our guest tonight. We love Olav coming on. And, you know, you told me something during the break, Olav. I feel kind of shameful. And, you know, as a Canadian, I do have to apologize. You actually skipped doing your own podcast just so you could come on this show.
Yeah. I did. We do, me and Ron Patton. I'm actually not just a writer for Paranoia. I'm actually a publisher as well. We do our Paranoia podcast. We record it on Thursdays at 10 o'clock. But, you know, I like Spaced Out Radio, and, you know, I have a commitment to Spaced Out Radio. So when you asked me to come on, I was like, you know what, Ron, we'll just do it next week. So here I am.
Well, next time I have you, I will remind myself not to book you for a Thursday, because I don't want to, you know, affect what you're doing, because you're getting some good information out there, and, you know, I want to make sure that we do it right next time. So I do apologize, but a heartfelt thank you for doing this for our audience. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You know, let's talk after the show, because if we can also add your podcast to our website, that would be kind of cool as well.
Yeah. And there's some other stuff that we're actually, we'll talk after the show.
Absolutely.
We've undertaken something that's very interesting. I think you'll get a kick out of. So.
Absolutely. Getting back to the secret planes before we get more into what's happening above in the skies. We're talking about the SR program. Now, after the SR-71, there's been all sorts of SR planes, from the SR-47 to the SR-75. What is this SR program?
Well, it's kind of a designation for surveillance aircraft. I think that now they're becoming more covert about, you know, I think a lot of what you see in the public, you know, if you're reading Aerospace and Defense Weekly is a very interesting magazine. They have a very interesting relationship with the kind of secret aircraft manufacturers, you know, like Lockheed or whoever, and intelligence services in general. In fact, like when the MiG-29 back in the day, that was like the plane to beat, right? The first public photos of the MiG-29 were actually in Aerospace and Defense Weekly. And so they were, you know, they got the photos, they sent somebody to Russia, they sat inside the cockpit, they took photos, and no doubt they gave them to the CIA first, but then the CIA was like, okay, we figured it out, so now you can publish it. But I think in general that a lot of these things that you see in the public domain, it's more like PR, because, what I do myself, right, is that I look for weird aircraft sightings and UFOs. Because a lot of times UFOs are misidentifications of exotic aircraft. And one of the best examples, it happened a while ago, but somebody had reported seeing a triangular aircraft flying over the South, right? I want to say it was like Georgia or somewhere. And another guy had taken a photo of a triangular aircraft and said, oh, it's a UFO, it's a UFO. He had taken a photo out of a commercial airliner of this triangular aircraft flying in the clouds not far from them. And so, you know, you piece those together and you can actually figure out where they were flying based on when it was seen and the time. And the actual trajectory of the aircraft made a lot of sense, because at the time it looked like it was going out toward Cuba. And there was a Russian surveillance ship that was docked in Havana Harbor at the time. But a lot of times these new aircraft, they don't really have names or numbers for quite a while, because they're really covert, and they've gotten to be very, very good at hiding them. Not necessarily hiding them from view. I mean, people see them. You can't really help that. But there's a lot of conjecture about different, what's it called? You know, is it an SR-72 or, you know, whatever. I don't, nowadays, over the last, say, 10 years, I've had less and less trust in the names that I hear, because by the time you hear about the TR-3B, right, that it's old news. You know, the stuff that they're really flying, you know, you won't hear about it for another 10 years. So I try to take it on a case-by-case basis and look at, these aircraft that people are seeing and try to figure out what it is. Because, like, a lot of the triangular aircraft that you see at high altitude, they're using very exotic engines. The ramjet kind of engine that the SR-71 used, or the rocket motor that the U-2 uses, or whatever, even the pulse detonation engine that the Aurora used, that's kind of like old news now, because there's been a shift toward trying to build one aircraft that can go from the ground up into space. And, there's a kind of hunt for an engine that can get you from the ground up into space. Right. So, the types of engines and other things that are being used now are very, very exotic, but I don't know that these aircraft necessarily have designations that we'll be able to know about. Plus, there's been an evolution in the communication technology. So, the communication between the aircraft and the ground is encrypted where it didn't used to be. And, so designations, I don't know how much faith I put in them anymore.
No, but it does go to show, though, that even you take the secret out of it, okay? Like the FA-18 was originally the YF-17. So there are different designations as they are building the aircraft to what they want. So just because there is an SR-72 or now supposedly an SR-75, it doesn't mean that prototype actually makes it. I mean, the probably the biggest example of that would be the XB-70 Valkyrie bomber that was scuttled. Right. And yet people are still in love with that aircraft. That was, it eventually led to the B-1 bomber.
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of different examples of aircraft that were scuttled. But, the one I always look at is the A-12, right? That originally when the A-12 was designed and built at Area 51, that was the predecessor to the SR-71. The A-12 was bigger than the SR-71. It was faster, and it was silver. And actually, interestingly enough for your show, at the time when they were testing the A-12, it was a CIA project, and they actually would cover it up by saying it was a UFO, because people would see this silver thing like streak across the sky, because obviously it's extremely fast. They'd see this thing go at like Mach 4 across the sky or whatever, and they go, "Oh my God, I saw a UFO!" And the CIA would go to the media industrial complex and say, "Yeah, it's a UFO." But what came out of that is that the KGB and other groups were putting people into sky watches looking for UFOs that were exotic aircraft, and then the FBI and the CIA were putting people into these UFO groups to watch the KGB guys that were looking for stuff in the sky.
So how many of these secret aircraft do you think the U.S. has for their surveillance program outside of the U-2?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I think active, I think there's probably two. There's like a big one and a small one. At least from what I've seen, there's like a big one and a small one. And they look very similar. It's just the size. And it appears that the bigger one is using something called an aerospike engine, which is very, very efficient. But it has to fly at extremely high altitude for the aerospike to work right. You have to have very, very thin air. So it uses some other kind of motor to get itself up to the minimum altitude. Then they engage the aerospike, and then the thing just takes off. I mean, aerospike is a super, super efficient engine. So I think that's probably what it is. But the way that it works, you can see the heat across the wings where the aerospike engine is. Like across the back of this triangle-looking thing, there's like a rectangle that is like discolored, and that's the heat output from the aerospike.
I'm curious to get your opinion on bringing Ben Rich into this conversation. Now, for those who don't know, Ben Rich... well, exactly, but Ben Rich in the 90s was quoted as saying, as the president of Lockheed Skunk Works, that he said two things that were very infamous. Number one, he said, we have the technology to get ET back home again. And number two, a little bit more infamous, I believe, is when he said, we are 800 years beyond in technology what we show the public. Did you buy those lines?
Absolutely. And in fact, Jan Harzan, whatever you think of MUFON nowadays, MUFON's been going through some issues, shall we say, but Jan Harzan, the head of MUFON, is an alumni of Caltech. And Jan Harzan, I guess, has gone on record as saying that the first quote, the one about not only do we have the technology to take ET home, but we have the contract, that was actually said in an alumni dinner, a Caltech alumni dinner. You know, when you're the head of the Skunk Works and, you know, you're doing that kind of stuff, you know, there's a certain level of ego to it, you know, that there's a certain level of boastfulness to it. And I think, you know, he's going to boast the capabilities of his engineers and his guys. And I think that it's probably true. I mean, there have been stories for decades about DARPA being 100 years ahead of it. I mean, you know, Stanton Friedman, right? The famous UFO researcher, you know, back in, when he worked in Westinghouse back in the 50s, you know, they were putting micronuclear reactors on planes, trying to use nuclear reactors as a power source for an aircraft. That was in the 50s, you know. It's like, who knows what they can do now? I mean, I've heard stories about quantum computing and all kinds of crazy stuff that they're doing. So, yeah, I believe it. I don't know if it's 800 years, but probably at least 100 or 200 years. That's a more conservative number that I've heard float around.
And that would make a little bit more sense. I mean, going 800 years advance, I mean, that would mean that we are getting to some real advanced physics and teleporting, unless we have been teleporting, and Andrew Bashago is correct on that. You know, but
I don't know about Andrew Bashago.
But if you go from supersonic to hypersonic, what's the next step after that to try and get through? Because I guess what I'm saying, spending trillions of dollars on these aircraft to get photos of, you know, whether or not Vladimir Putin is riding his grizzly bear shirtless is a little ridiculous when you consider that the technology and the spies and everything. It just seems like a big waste of money unless they are preparing for bigger programs to expand outside of our atmosphere.
Well, I think that's exactly what you're seeing, right? But I think that you know, hypersonic, supersonic, I think they probably push the envelope as far as they really care to cost effectively within the Earth, right? I think probably what you're seeing now is there's probably a shift toward doing more stuff in space and doing more stuff deep sea, you know? But I think that really what they're after is space. Because, you know, you look at the moon, right? You know, this idea that there's helium-3 on the moon, you know, that's an incredible power source. And, you know, there are plenty of secret space program stories about what they're capable of doing. And I think that that's probably where they're really focusing on. They may take the money out of the Air Force budget, but, you know, the Air Force has Space Command for a reason, right? So I think that a lot of the work that they're doing now is probably up in space.
I'm curious to get your opinion. Yesterday it was all over the media as we shift gears to go more to the secret space program. But yesterday it was all over the media about NASA trying to hire a physicist to protect the planet from anything alien coming into our solar system. Now, they put it as microorganisms or biological organisms, you know, coming in off of craft that come, you know. But do you think there's more to that? Was there a hidden message, in your opinion, to that job posting?
Well, I think looking at the job, because one of my friends sent it to me, looking at the job posting, I think it's very clearly somebody who's trying to prevent the Andromeda strain from happening. You know, for those of you who've never seen the Andromeda strain, go watch it. But basically a satellite comes in, and there's some sort of a microorganism that basically turns your blood into into like crystals. It kills a whole town, and then there's this like secret lab, which I do believe exists, called Wildfire, where they try to engineer a solution for it. So I think that the job posting you saw was very much in that vein of what they're looking for, somebody to basically clean this stuff up when it comes back and prevent contamination. But I think the choice of titles, I think, might be predictive programs.
Because to
you know,
me,
they thought that through, right?
No, and I understand that. The last time we had you on, and I've said it ad nauseum on this show, I mean, the way John Podesta had tweeted out when he left Barack Obama's White House to join Hillary Clinton's campaign, it was so obvious, if you read between the lines, with him saying, look, the alien files are there, I just can't get them out. And so when I read between the lines, maybe that's just me, because as a journalist, you try and look between the lines to see the story within the story. It made me wonder, was this NASA's way of subtly putting it out there that disclosure is bound to happen soon?
I don't actually believe in disclosure. I think that disclosure is more hype that puts money in certain people's pockets. But from my point of view, we can talk about disclosure separately. But I think that there is, I may like, exotic aircraft, and I may believe that most UFOs are piloted by humans from Kansas. But it doesn't mean that I don't believe that aliens exist at all. I do believe that aliens exist, and that they may be coming here, right? And so, there may be files about them, in some sort. Right. But I think it's interesting that they posted that job, because there's actually a much more interesting thing. And I wrote an article about it in Paranoia once called, was the UFOs in the Skies Over Camelot. And what it was is that during the Kennedy administration, it's somewhat controversial, but there's a memo called the Byrne Memo, where it was a memo that was partially torched. And what it directs is the head of, there's two parts to it. The one part is Kennedy ordering the head of NASA to talk to the head of the CIA and to bring him up to speed on the defensive capabilities of NASA, which they're not supposed to have, right? It's a civilian space agency run by generals with a lot of military people, but it was, he was supposed to work with the head of the CIA to bring him up to speed on what the defensive capabilities were, and to make sure that they could identify everything in orbit, because they don't want to shoot down Russian stuff. And the second part was basically, talk to the Soviets to make sure that we're not going to blow their stuff out of the sky, which is interesting because it seems to indicate there is some sort of extraplanetary group up there operating in some capability. Now, I have various theories on who those people are, but I think that some of them are probably UFOs with aliens on board. So there may indeed be files. I'm not sure that it is what we think it is, right? That being said, back in the 90s, there was a guy named Bob Oshler, who was hooked up with this guy, Bobby Randman, who was a former naval admiral, part of naval intelligence, to do some sort of a road show about UFOs and aliens or whatever. And he was hooked up by a guy named Timothy Good, and he was a pretty well-known researcher. And it seemed to be fairly legit until Oshler was discredited by this guy named Guardian. So, maybe that was their version of disclosure, but I think disclosure is as we imagine it to be, is probably not what it is.
I want to get to a couple questions from our audience here. Let's start off at hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. Canadian Joe is asking, with the advent of the Space Corps USA, is the secret space program not so secret anymore?
I would say that it's not as secret as it used to be, because there's a lot more people with cell phones and the internet, and there are people looking for it. So when you look for it, it kind of, you start to be able to put the pieces together. for example, what Gary McKinnon found, made a lot of sense. And so, a lot of more people are talking about it. So I think that inherently reduces its covertness. Because one of the things that the intelligence services and our governments in general like to do is they like to hide in plain sight. And so now it makes it harder to hide in plain sight when people are looking for you.
Let's get to
Hope
Gail's.
that answers your question.
Absolutely. Let's get to Gail's question in the SOR Space Travelers Club. She asks, Olav, if we have these technologies and programs hundreds of years in advancement of what the public knows, where is it all hidden?
I think it's hidden at Cold Lake. I think it's hidden at Groom Lake. I think it's hidden at Dugway. I think it's hidden in space. It's all over the place. One of the things that I've really come to believe is that this notion of the Cold War, right? I think that because I have my own agenda with the whole thing, I think that all these governments, it's very much a kind of 1984 scenario where a bunch of guys got together and they said, well, this week East Asia and Eurasia are at war, and Pacifica is not, and they kind of shovel around who's fighting who this month to kind of keep us looking in the other direction. But I think that there is a unity between at least us and the Chinese and the Russians/Soviets, as far as in the English and obviously Canadians, kind of NATO and then the Russians and the Chinese as far as like what is actually going on. I don't think they're as odds as we think they are, or at least if they are, that there's a mutual pact in regards to the secret space program. I think it's a multinational thing. I don't think it's just run by us and we're trying to fight the Russians. We
had Bill Burns on last week from UFO Hunters, and it was the first time that we had him on. I was absolutely amazed because I had heard the rumors too about why their show was canceled when they were literally number one in their type of programming genre. Until he said that he had a member of the Men in Black come up to him and say, well, this is your last season on the air, because they were getting too close to things. Do you think then, especially as we focused in on that conversation on Dugway and Dulcie, do you think that with those areas there that they're not only testing this technology, but they are working with some sort of alien groups in order to maybe reverse engineer or compromise on engineering technology for advancement here?
I don't. I'm not a big proponent of us working with aliens to build secret aircraft. I think that we built it ourselves. I think my own personal belief is that if the aliens are here, they're here autonomously from us. I don't think that we have any deals with them or anything like that. But, it's possible that we're back engineering their stuff. But, especially recently, I've started to see things that make me believe that that's probably not the case. One of the really fascinating things that I saw recently is that there's a great guy. His name's Walter Bosley. He's obsessed with this Sonora Aero Club and the arrows and the mysterious airships of the 1800s. And there's a guy named Del Shaw who worked on these things back in the 1800s, and he produced their collages, very kind of strange art of these airships. And Walter found in one of the photos, because it's his obsession, Walter found what appears to be the bell, the Nazi bell, in use in one of these arrows, and with the counter rotations and the weird liquid and the whole thing. He found it in an airship from like 1860. So that would seem to indicate that the bell, as we call it, Der Glocke, was in use in the mid-1800s, almost 100 years before, supposedly Hans Kammler took it to Risi. So, that kind of changes the dynamic. Where they got it, that's whole nother conversation that you probably want to have with Walter. But, But it seems to indicate that the technology that's being used to power some of this stuff has been around for hundreds of years, and they've been working on it for quite some time. But humans have been working on it.
I was very surprised, getting back to Bill for a second, I was very surprised at how open and honest he was to actually confirm that conspiracy for us, basically coming out and saying, yeah, they took us off the air because we were getting too close to the answers that they didn't want us to hear. Are you surprised that he has been that vocal about it?
No, I mean, Bill's a great guy, and he's very upfront. You know, he'll tell you the way he sees it. You know, he's going to tell you what happened, and you know that maybe the consequences be damned. But no, and I think that I think he does it. I think he's that upfront about it because there's not much that they're going to do to him about it. I mean, if they rub him out now after coming on the show and talking about that, everybody's going to point to them and go, you know what, you just rubbed that guy out. It doesn't serve their purpose. But there is a tight. I forget there's an actual CIA program where they infiltrated the mass media. So it's not Mockingbird. Mockingbird? Well, there's a CIA project where they actually infiltrated the mass media and used various news sources to control the dissemination of information. So I'm not surprised that they kicked him off the air. And he was poking around in some uncomfortable places. That's for sure.
Let's get to a question at hashtag Spaced Out Radio from Eric down in Florida. And Eric is asking, Olav, do you know or maybe have you seen any official documents that have been leaked that talk about a secret space program?
No. I have a rule about whistleblowers and leak stuff, but no, nothing that's leaked, only stuff that you can find with good old-fashioned investigation. And you know, a lot of the stuff that McKinnon talked about. I think a lot of because I think that there's a greater agenda at work, I think a lot of that is in the public domain. But I think it's very clear what's going on. And I think McKinnon, you know, he found some very interesting stuff. Because, you know, what McKinnon found was really, to me, like the smoking gun, because it was bureaucratic garbage, right? It was movement orders, it was transfers, it was, you know, supply manifests, all this kind of leftover kind of bureaucratic garbage that just exists in a bureaucratic society. It wasn't like, you know, he didn't have like beautiful photos of the launching of some space battle cruiser that looks like the Yamato or, you know, or the Enterprise or whatever. He found equipment manifests and other stuff. And I think that's the kind of stuff that I think people, you know, it may be classified, but people don't care as much because they're like, well, it's an equipment manifest. And, you know, I'm lazy today, right? So I think that was very interesting. But no, I'm outside of stuff that's come out of FOIA, you know, bits and pieces that you have to put together. You know, a lot of it is just really good old-fashioned investigation and trying to connect dots.
I know you don't like a lot of whistleblowers, and you're very skeptical of them, as everybody should be.
Yes.
But there are people...
Be skeptical of me.
But there are people out there who want to talk. And maybe they don't want their name recorded or anything along those lines, but they want to talk and they want to let the public know what is truly going on. So when you're talking with a whistleblower then, Olav, how are you deciphering whether or not this person's handing you disinformation or truth about what they're working on?
You know, the few times, and usually, funny enough, they come through on the radio. And the few times that I've actually talked to one, or what could be perceived as one, they call into a radio show. You know, the first thing I do is I apply something called Occam's razor. William of Ockham has made this model where the simplest answer is probably the right one, right? And I try to look at what they're saying and say, okay, well, does that make sense, right? What they're saying, is it even reasonable? Because, you hear there's quite a number of whistleblowers that have very exotic stories, right? Well, let's say Bob Lazar, for example. I've always been a proponent of Bob Lazar. I believe Bob Lazar. I've met Bob Lazar. He's a great guy. He's really nice. And I believe him. I believe that he is telling you what he saw. Now, if that's actually what happened, that's a different thing, right? But he believes very firmly in what he saw and what he experienced. And, we can have a whole show on, well, are they planted memories or whatever. But you take Bob Lazar, for example, right? Very reticent to ever talk about anything, very shy guy, didn't really want to talk about it too much, just kind of wanted to say his piece and just evaporate, right? He obviously has very sophisticated technical knowledge. I've seen what he's built, the jet cars and the rocket backpacks and all that crap. I've seen that stuff, and it's real, But the important thing about Lazar is that in all the time since 1989, when Lazar came out to George Knapp, his story has not changed. And it's not complex. It's not a complex story. It's very simple. He was approached. He went out to, he was accepted into the program. He went out there. This is what they told him. This is where he worked. This is what he saw. This is what he did. Done. It doesn't expand. And a lot of times with people who are being less than forthright about what they actually experience, they'll take an experience, right? And people will go, oh my God, right? And then they feel like they have to one-up it, right? Because maybe your experience is worth one book. Well, how are you going to write book number 2, right? So it's like you have to one-up yourself. Well, now I didn't just see a UFO. Now I climbed on the UFO. Well, now I didn't just climb on the UFO. Now I was part of the secret space program. Now I wasn't just part of the secret space program, but I was the head of the secret space program, whatever. Or, now I didn't just go on a spaceship. Now there are aliens involved. It has to keep expanding and expanding, right? In my own experience, when these guys have called into a radio show, it's very short and it's very concise. Like I was on Ground Zero once. This guy called in. He said, I was an aerospace engineer. I worked on this project. It was called Solar Warden, right? And he said his project was called Solar Warden. He defined where he did it, which was he wouldn't tell you specifically. It's kind of I was in Southern California. Okay, well, there are a handful of places that you probably would have been in Southern California. I was this kind of an aerospace engineer. I worked on this satellite. The satellite did this. There were 2 other satellites that did this. We launched it at this time. And then you go back and you say, okay, well, was there a launch at that time? Did we have the capability, at least ostensibly, to do some of this stuff? And you just kind of piece it together, and you take these little bits and pieces that these guys will tell you in 2 or 3 minutes, and then you start to try to verify it. Say, okay, well, that same procedure. That's how I came to believe what I believe. Why the secret space program exists, what its agenda is, where it's going, and all that. I came to that because I took something that I believed was probably fundamentally true. I said, you know what? They put very specific things in there. I'm going to go see if those very specific things exist. Hey, guess what they do? And you can go from there. But a lot of times it's very short, it's very nebulous, and it takes a lot of work to figure out what they were talking about.
So when you look back at Bob Lazar, there were times where he said, if I quote him correctly, and please forgive me if I don't, that there were times that employees were getting drugged going in or coming back out, so they wouldn't have that good a memory. Yet Bob seems to recall everything that happened to him. What's the difference there?
Well, he doesn't recall everything that happened to him. He has huge blank spots that he can't reconcile, right? But he remembers bits and pieces of it, and that's what he'll tell you. But that's the thing I said where, I believe that he absolutely believes what he's telling you, right? That whatever he says he saw, he, inside his person, believes that he saw it. Now, does that mean that it really happened? Well, MK Ultra says it not necessarily, right? We spent decades in MK Ultra learning how to screw with people's minds and put in projected memories, screen memories, and all kinds of stuff, right? But he absolutely believes it, and even in disinformation, right? That there's this notion in disinformation that somewhere in there is a bit of truth, and getting to that truth may be very difficult, but there may, it's basically a lot of BS wrapped in the truth, right? That there's a little line. Think of it, you know what it's like? It's like a sushi roll, right? In the center, you got the fish, right? You got the tuna or the salmon or whatever. And then you wrap rice around it, and then you wrap the nori, the seaweed around it. Well, you got to dig through the seaweed, got to dig through the rice to get down to the fish because the fish is in the center. It's kind of like that. So, he doesn't remember everything, but I think he has faithfully reported what he does remember. I don't know if everything that he thinks he saw is what he actually experienced, or if it was manipulated.
And like you said, his story never changed. And I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong again, he did pass a polygraph.
He did pass a polygraph. He did. And there have been other people over time that have come forward and said, well, I saw him at the Janet terminal or whatever. And, a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people lambast him and they say, well, these degrees that you say you have, I can't find them. And he said, you worked here. Well, I can't find you. Well, he is in the Los Alamos phone book, in the installation phone book. And, I personally knew a guy a long time ago who was in the Army, and he was just an enlisted guy in the Army. He was an airframe mechanic, and he worked on helicopters. And being an airframe mechanic, he had a pretty good understanding of the flaws of this particular helicopter, and he kept going to his NCO saying, you know what, there's a flaw in this thing, it's going to break. It's a flaw in this thing, it's going to break, right? And he kept being, kind of mouthy about it. And eventually one day they got tired of him because he kept trying to go up the food chain saying, hey, this is a dangerous situation. He's trying to be a diligent mechanic, right? And one day somebody somewhere got a little tired of it and said, you know what, when your next reenlistment comes around, you probably shouldn't reenlist. Why don't you just go be a civilian? You're probably better off, working for Southwest Airlines or whatever, right? And so, he was like, I can read the handwriting on the wall, so he got out. But he had earned a bunch of money for the, for college and other stuff. And so one day he was trying to activate some of his veterans benefits. And he went, before Fort Ord was closed, he went down to Fort Ord to talk to the veterans kind of coordinator. And he goes to the gate, and they're like, "Hey, show me your ID." Well, I'm not in the military anymore, but here's my ID, whatever. And the guard goes in the shack to look at it, and he comes back out and he says, "There's a problem. Just wait here." He goes back in the shack and he's calling somebody, and he's calling another person. He comes back out and says, "I'm sorry, but we don't have any record of you ever being in the military." And this guy is like, "What do you mean? I was in the military. I was a corporal or whatever." He's like, "I was a corporal. I was an airframe mechanic, and it's where I was stationed." He had his DD-214. He even has the little picture that they take after boot camp of him, in his uniform standing in front of the flag. They had completely erased his ever having been in the military. So I know it's totally possible. And this guy was a corporal, who just had a problem with an airframe. So, you take Bob Lazar, you want to erase him. I mean, Caltech is they have a lot of defense contracts. If they want the defense guys come in and say, hey, erase this guy, they're going to erase him.
This leads to Gail's question, where she is asking, Olav, what purpose, then, does it serve to try and discredit people like Bob Lazar?
I think because it serves as a distraction. That if we're all arguing about whether Bob Lazar, it's like, okay, Bob Lazar has a pandering conviction, right? Because, he put in a surveillance system in a brothel. Okay, let's all have a big argument about that, right? While we're spending a lot of time and energy arguing about that, we're not spending time and energy looking at other things, right? A lot of times, it's all about kind of street magic, sleight of hand. It's like, we're going to occupy you over here worrying about this thing so that we can do whatever we want over here, and you'll never notice because you're too consumed. It's kind of it's a fairly effective method of stopping people from actually trying to do research. Because I'm on here defending him, right? We're not talking about other stuff, and I'm not researching something. I'm defending Bob Lazar. Not that you're interviewing me, and that's where the conversation went, and that's what we should be doing. But I'm saying that on a larger scale, it's like, let's go to a convention and have a whole bunch of smart people sitting at a table arguing whether Bob Lazar told the truth or not. Meanwhile, we're not out there looking at other stuff that's more important.
I do want to ask you one more question in regards to Bob Lazar, if you don't mind. Sure. But it's indirectly focused on him. Why have we not seen another Bob Lazar come out of Area 51 or Dugway or Dulce to open up about what is going on? I mean, Bob did this back in 1989. We're coming on 30 years. That's a long time for nobody else to really come up and take the stand that he did.
Well, it's about evolution, right? It's not about revolution, it's about evolution. And I think they had quite a problem with Bob. And I think that after that, they went back and said, you know what, we had a little bit of a security problem. And so I think they retooled their efforts to do more conditioning or to be more careful about who they hire. Because, there are plenty of people who have spent their entire lives in the intelligence service that will not tell you a damn thing. They will not tell you a damn thing. It doesn't matter if they're dying. They take personal pride in not telling you anything. And they're conditioned to do that, and they're specifically picked to do that because you don't want them talking about what they did. So I think they probably went back and said, you know what, we had a problem with this. We need to do more compartmentalization. He knew too much about the overall project. Maybe we need to break it up into smaller units. Because the way a special access program works, right, is that you could have a machinist who his whole job in life is to take a square piece of metal and drill a hole in it. Then he hands it to another guy. That guy takes it down the hallway, hands it to another guy, who machines the edges to make it circular. By the time you get done, it's some sort of a component on a nuclear missile. But the guys who actually did it have no idea what they're building. They just know I drill a hole in this piece of metal. I drill a hole in this piece of metal. So I think they probably did a lot more of that over the years. They made it a lot more compartmentalized. So there are very few people who see the bigger picture.
But what about someone, say, who is at this elusive S4 where there's said to be alien technology from crashed aircraft underground in a mountainside?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I mean, when somebody is hired to do a job like that, they're going to be very particular about who they hire. They're going to put them through psychological testing to see if they're the kind of person that's going to talk about their experience. I mean, the whole thing with Lazar is that, it was all a little bit rushed. When you hear a story and you talk to him and you hear about how everything went down, it all just seemed a little bit rushed. It was all, somebody was infatuated with him and thought that he could really make a difference. It was like they kind of just shoved him in real quick, and they didn't do a lot of this other stuff. Plus, even if there is a guy at S4, he may be working on a straight up UFO, and somebody told him, well, that's not a UFO, that's a dishwasher, and he's the kind of guy who's going to believe it. Or he'll say to himself, well, they're telling me it's a dishwasher. If I go out and tell people I'm working on a UFO, they're going to make me disappear, or, it's going to end my career or whatever. They pick people who pick people now who are a lot more willing to not talk about what they're doing, because whistleblowers in general in the last 20 years have gotten a really raw deal, right? We supposedly have all these protections, but every time there's a whistleblower that comes out and says something that somebody somewhere doesn't like, suddenly they're on the run, or they're being thrown in prison, or they're, we're supposed to call them traitors or whatever, when they're talking about things that are illegal or not right. So we haven't really done a good job of protecting whistleblowers and kind of, at least government whistleblowers, and kind of, harboring that kind of an ecosystem where they can come out and feel safe, that they can talk about something that's not right and people will listen.
Makes sense. And I understand that. And I can understand the entire addition of security so other Bob Lazar type trends don't happen. But do you think then that maybe if there is this drug program going on, and maybe I'm reaching here, okay? Maybe I am, and if I am, you can tell me just to move on. But this drug program where they were drugging people to come out, do you think maybe they upped the dosage of people, or maybe in the contracts have veiled threats saying this is what's going to happen if you open your mouth?
It could be either or both. I mean, I'm fairly certain that, the process to get a classification is pretty mind-numbing. And I think they probably do tell them, that if you go out and you spill the beans on this stuff, we're gonna call you a terrorist and put you in Guantanamo or whatever. So I think there probably is a lot more fear about whistleblowing. But there's so much emphasis on whistleblowers, but the truth is that a lot of the information that you really seek, it exists in the public domain. You just have to look for it. You just have to be patient and do the diligent work. Whistleblowers in general, I wouldn't trust them in general, because you don't know what their motivations are.
That is true. That is true. And do you think a lot of these whistleblowers are having their own secret agendas? Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh yeah, I'm sure of it. Oh, I won't get into particular people, but there are a few that are rotating around at the moment that I think clearly have their own agenda. Absolutely.
Is it more about, because people love terms. They love being coined something. They love titles.
Right.
Is there maybe an addiction becoming with this term whistleblower because of book deals, because of radio deals, 15 minutes of fame? Is that what you think it is?
Yeah, I think that especially in the conspiracy community now, Jim Marrs just passed away, right?
Yes.
And to me, Jim Marrs he was a real researcher. He got in there and he really, got in there and did research and found things and talked to people and understood stuff. Redfern, he gets out there, he talks to people. It's like these guys are actual researchers out there researching things, right? But I think that over the last, say, 15 years, there's been a kind of culture shift in conspiracy theory in general, where it's like, oh, you say you're a whistleblower, so suddenly, you're telling the truth. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, I could come on your show, say, you know what, I'm a whistleblower. I've been to Zeta Reticuli, and I could feed you a whole bunch of stories about because I'm a smart guy and I studied anthropology, so I can construct, the morphology, the kind of physical characteristics of an alien that would make sense for coming from Zeta Reticuli. And I could feed you a big old story that you could verify just enough that it would make it seem reasonable. But now some of the stuff that some of these guys are coming up with is insane. I mean, the things that they're talking about make no rational sense, but people believe it. And they believe it because that's what they want to hear. And a lot of times these kind of neo whistleblowers, they're telling people what they want to hear. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to have a conversation. And the first thing that I always tell everybody, every lecture, the few times that I've done it, every lecture I've ever given, the first thing I do is I say, don't believe me. Don't trust me. I'm lying to you. Go take everything that I said and verify every bit of it, But these guys, they go up on stage and they say, no, believe me. I'm telling you the truth. Buy my book. Buy my videos. Subscribe to my service, whatever. I'm not here to sell a book. I'm not here to get you to subscribe to a service. I'm here to have a conversation because I like your radio show.
Well, I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that. That works. We are right tight against another break here coming on up, Olav. And I promise you, that second hour, we did mean to talk about the secret space program, and it just kind of, we got out of track right there. We really did get out of track, as per usual. But Olav Phillips is our guest. Paranoia Magazine is his magazine. You can check it out online, and he's going to be back. I promise you, we're going to get into TR-3Bs. We're going to get into secret space programs, bases on the moon, Mars, Titan, because Titan has oil and it may need some freedom, America. Just to let you know. Appreciate you guys tuning on in. 1 hour to go, and we will continue on right here on the mighty SOR at spacedoutradio.com. We'll be right back.
We are getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio. And on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. We finish off the week tomorrow night with R. Keith Andrews. The first Friday of the month, the ET Connection is a monthly feature we do on this show talking everything extraterrestrial. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time, right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listeners. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Pantochronometer. Pantochronometer is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, be like Mr. Skeptic and John Porter. Use hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. You can follow me at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on iHeartRadio in the United States. And our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can listen to some Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on my latest blog on the Encounter Online, put together by Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham, and so much more. Everything you can find at spacedoutradio.com. Now, from Paranoia Magazine, Olav Phillips, we're talking about the secret space program, and we're actually going to get into that this hour, Olav. How are you?
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. A lot of these black triangles that people are seeing, and I've seen 2 in my life, a lot of people are very confused whether or not they are of extraterrestrial descent. More and more, it's starting to seem like these black triangles people are seeing is what we call the TR3B. Could you explain what the TR3B is?
Well, the TR3B was it was a program to build a triangular aircraft. I mean, at its most base, there are a number of offshoots of it, but it's basically a triangular aircraft. But the TR3B was, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, the TR3B was more of a drone, and it was a little smaller. You know, some of these black triangles are quite large. I actually saw one fly over my head, and it was quite massive.
Now, the TR3B, what a lot of people suspect is each point of the triangle has a light with a big circular light in the center of it. When I saw the black triangle that I saw, it was lit up underneath with silver orbs connected by these orange light type bars, right under the undercarriage. Nothing like what the typical TR3B sightings have seemed. So do you believe there are different versions that are human of this craft? Or do you believe that maybe they are, some of them, of extraterrestrial descent?
I do believe there are various types of it. Some of them don't have any lights at all. The one that I saw had, I've seen a couple of them. One did have lights on the corners. 2 of them have lights on the corners, and then one had no lights whatsoever. I think they are variants. Some people think they're ARVs, like alien re-engineered vehicles. I personally am of the opinion that they're human. Although back in the 90s, there was a very strange thing in Europe that was happening with these triangular aircraft, that they would fly down the freeways, and then they would shine lights. They like nuclear reactors, and they would go to nuclear reactors, and they would shine lights in graveyards, which seems kind of strange. The notion that they would follow roadways, like freeways, that actually makes sense, because the freeways are, it's easy to find, and you know where it's going to take you, right? But the graveyard thing, I don't understand. Those may have been alien, but I think a lot of them are human.
How do we tell the difference, or can we?
I think it's probably behavior, what they do, because fundamentally, this goes back to my days in college when I studied anthropology. If you have something coming from another place that is alien in origin, that their motivations of why they do things and how they do things are going to be fundamentally alien to you. So if you see it doing something that's really strange, that makes no sense to you whatsoever, then that's probably more likely something that would be alien. If you're seeing it just fly across the sky, or or doing aerobatics or whatever, then that's probably more human, right? But you have to remember that if it's one of the problems that I have with ufology, right? That they try to ascribe human motivation to aliens, and you can't really do that because they're aliens. They think differently than you do. Their motivations are not yours. So, if you see something doing something really, truly bizarre, it has no basis in reality, well, it's probably alien.
Well, that begs the question then, how would we design the same type of aircraft that they have without any type of back engineering?
Well, that's the thing, right? That's where you come to a conundrum. For me personally, I think that all those triangles are human, right? That why they're looking at back in the 90s, they were looking at graveyards. That's something I have yet to figure out. But I think that a lot of them were human. I think that more of some of the disc-shaped stuff that does really weird things, like make 90-degree turns and other stuff like that, I think that's probably more alien. I mean, I saw a dogfight with 14 of these things flying around in the sky. Those were human, right? Because what they were doing is they were having a dogfight. They were training, but I've also seen things that didn't do things that made sense, and those were probably alien.
Do you believe the TR-3B, like Randy Kramer believes, is what they are using to shuttle executives, government officials, soldiers, military brass to different areas of our solar system? No, I think that these aircraft that we see, because some of these triangles, right, are fairly massive in size. I think those are more to get from the ground up into space. Then once they get into space, I think they use something else. But I think that because when you're in space, you don't need something that's aerodynamic, right? There's no resistance. So you can make a space battle cruiser look like whatever you want. But going through the atmosphere requires something that's aerodynamic so that it doesn't have drag, and it can do reentry well. So I think I think that those aircraft are more getting you up into orbit, or maybe getting you as far as the moon or something else. But I don't think that they're the same vehicle that's used to move between the planets. No. So do you believe there are some sort of human motherships up there?
I do. I absolutely do.
Where would they put them? How would they get them there without anybody noticing if they were built here?
Well, they wouldn't be built here. Something of that size would probably be built in orbit, built in space. And remember, anything that you see in space as far as photography is controlled by the ESA, it's controlled by NASA, it's controlled by the Russian Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, the Chinese Space Agency. So what you see floating around up there in these beautiful panoramic shots, that's really controlled by the government, a government of some sort. So you're trusting that you're seeing everything, and I don't think you are.
The reason why I asked that is 2 weeks ago we had a gentleman named David Schock on the air. I'm not sure if you've talked to him or know who he is. He's with a company. He's with a company called Fine Line Labs, and in early 2018 they are actually going to launch a satellite that is strictly for UFO hunting.
Cool. And it's kind of like a microsat.
Yeah, it's like a cube.
Yeah.
Okay, about the size of a shoebox. And it's going up 179 miles into space, well below where the International Space Station is. But the main thing is they are going, and every 5 seconds, this satellite is going to take a picture from up and down. And if we have this secret space program going on, what happens if this satellite catches something, in your opinion?
They'll probably destroy it. It'll probably suffer some sort of mechanical failure. I'd imagine.
Right. You don't think those photographs... but what if they capture something ufological? Would they do the same thing?
I think so. Because they want to control the information, right? They don't want... it's one thing to have Bob over on the street with his iPhone taking photos of, some weird disk in the sky. It's another thing to expose things that they're doing in orbit. And I think that if they catch anything, I think they're going to deorbit it. I mean, there's some very weird stuff up there. We were told back in the 80s under Reagan that they scrapped the Star Wars program. They didn't scrap the Star Wars program. That stuff's up there. The Russians launched something called the Polya Skip. It was the size of a space shuttle, this huge battle station, and it's like they claim that they sent the same command twice and it deorbited itself. I mean, the Russians, for example, have launched no less than 5 battle stations in orbit. I mean, real legit battle stations with cannons and stuff on them. So, and you didn't really hear about that. So, I think they like to keep their secrecy. I mean, sometimes they mess up with STS-48 or, they try to be as open as they seemingly as they can be. And you'll see something weird, off one of the ISS cams. But every time that happens, right, you see something weird in front of the ISS. It's like, oops, that camera's having a problem. Or, oh, we're going to move the camera now. Look at the big astronaut with a wrench. So they actively try to cover this stuff up. And I can't see them letting that thing sit up there if it's actually working as it's supposed to.
We got some questions coming in from our audience here. Eric is asking, what do you think, Olav, that the Black Knight satellite is?
It's very, very interesting that you asked me that. I actually wrote a chapter in a book called Ark of the Covenant and Other Ancient Secret Weapons, I think it's called, on Inner Light Publishing, the Tim Beckley thing. And in that, I actually hypothesized that the Black Knight is a very ancient kind of defense platform. And it's left over from a very ancient war. And I think that it's a spent munitions platform, and it goes and it hides in this one particular point. I think it's L2 that it hides at, and which is it's a point in space where there's equilibrium between the gravitational pull of the moon, the Earth, and the sun. So you can sit there with very low power consumption. You don't really have to expend a lot of energy to stay stationary in that point. And I think what happens is that when something exotic comes into orbit that it doesn't know about, it actually comes out of hiding and then analyzes it to see if it's a threat or not. And then it decides, no matter what it decides, it says, well, I don't have any weaponry left, so I'm going to leave. Right? And so I think it's actually a spent munitions platform from a very ancient war.
So you don't think it's anything of alien technology? Because I remember Heather Broussard, or Patty Broussard, once sent me a video showing that the reason why the Columbia blew up was that they were actually trying to grab the Black Knight satellite with the Canadarm to bring it down to Earth, and they got zapped. Now, to me, that's a little too sci-fi to believe, but the video...
It's also too big.
I don't know. Maybe they were trying to get a piece of it.
It's possible.
You think that is possible, that video would be true?
It's possible. I mean, I'd have to see it. But in general, I suspect that it's a spent munitions platform, because they're in the Bhagavad Gita the Vedas. These are ancient, an ancient history written about in India, that there was a king, and when the king died, his sons, who were the princes, went to war to try to control the kingdom, because they kind of had their own kingdoms, but they wanted the big one. And so they went to war. And at the end of the war, and this is where you get the Vimanas and all that stuff, at the end of the war, the one brother destroyed the city of the other brother. And the way that they described it, it was like something like a spear from heaven that had all the energy of the universe. And when it hit the ground, it had this cataclysmic explosion. Well, a lot of people have interpreted that to be some sort of a nuclear exchange, that these two guys were nuking each other. And there is actually a very large crater. I can't remember the name of the town offhand. There is a rather large crater near this town. And so people have hypothesized that it was nuclear. They've actually gone out to do tests, or there's a little bit of wind, to do tests. And they find nuclear, radiation. The problem is the radiation that they find is consistent with normal radiation that you'd find anywhere. It's not particularly high. And if the level of damage that was implied by this story actually happened, that place would be, totally radioactive for the next 100,000 years. So what I hypothesized was that the Black Knight was a munitions platform, and what it did is it came into position and fired a kinetic energy weapon into the city. Something like the Hammer of Thor, this idea that, well, in the Hammer of Thor, it's a telephone pole-sized tungsten rod with an outer coating, and when it goes through re-entry, that outer coating heats up and turns into plasma. And when this telephone pole-sized tungsten rod hits the Earth, it's equivalent to about a quarter to a half a megaton of impact, like a quarter megaton to a half a megaton nuclear device hitting the Earth. And then when it hits the Earth, the outer shell is turned to plasma. It cracks and flies everywhere, right? And then you have this, crater. And I think that what the Black Knight was a kinetic energy weapon that bombarded the city with kinetic energy weapon.
Let's get to another couple questions from Eric Cooper. And he is asking, Olav, have you ever seen an unidentified flying object that you deemed extraterrestrial?
I have. I absolutely have. I saw, when I was a kid, well, I've seen a few. But I guess, you chase this stuff and you see them. I saw something bizarre that actually, it's a funny story. I actually talked to Dad Steiger about this. But I saw this bizarre white light hanging outside my second floor window, and I could not figure out what the hell it was. And it was probably a couple feet in diameter, and it wasn't so bright you couldn't look at it, but it illuminated my room. And I did what kids do. I hid under the blankets, and I kept reading my Choose Your Own Adventure. Finally, I went and got my dad, because my dad had been in the military. And my dad, you gotta see this. And he comes in, and it's gone. And actually, I talked to, I'm 42 years old. I talked to my dad about this about 6 months ago. And he was like, I absolutely believe you, what you said, because I know you, and you're too rational. But anyway, so I saw this weird thing, and I thought to myself, well, that is truly bizarre. I need an explanation. And I was in probably 5th grade at the time. And I went to the library at my elementary school, and I said, I saw something, because when you're in 5th grade, right? You don't say, oh, you don't know the Dewey Decimal System, and you don't say to the librarian, I want to know where the UFOs books are. You say, I saw this weird thing outside my window. I don't know what it was, and I'm trying to figure it out. And so the librarian tells me, oh, the airplane books are over here. And I get a big long lecture about the Dewey Decimal System. And I said, no. It's not an airplane. I lived on Air Force bases. I live in the flight pattern. I know what an airplane looks like. That's not what this was. And she goes, oh, you want those books? Well, those are over there at the bottom of the shelf. Right? So I go down there, and I get down on my knees, and I find these books. God, it's really windy right now. I find these books, and there's Mysteries of Time and Space by Brad Steiger. There's, I think, Messengers of Deception by Jacques Delis. There's the Hynek Report by Jan Allen Hynek. And there's one other. And I got all 4 of them, and I took them home. And I could not read the Hynek thing because it was just too dense. The Valley book Valley is an amazing writer, but to a fifth grader, it was a little hard to understand because his language was too adult. And so I read Mysteries of Time and Space by Brad Steiger cover to cover, and that's what launched me into wanting to experience UFOs. And so the second time, I still don't know what I saw. The second time, I was walking my dog. I was probably 12 years old, 13 years old, which would have put it around 87, around the time when Lazar was working at S4. I saw a Lazar Sportster model hanging at about 20,000 feet over my head. And I stood there for, it seemed like an eternity, and it just was hanging there. And it looked like exactly what you see in the tester's box. So I'm pretty sure those were aliens.
Let's get to Coop's second question here. What is your opinion and version of the Phoenix Lights, then?
You know, it's you know, I when I do an interview, I like to be completely honest, right? Because I believe that I'm a nuts and bolts guy, and I like evidence. I like to believe that I can prove my theories about things. If I have enough time, I can explain to you why I think what I think. You know, I'm really not sure about the Phoenix Lights. The UFO part of it was so damn enormous that I don't, you know, there's a lot of possibilities, right? That it was alien, that it was one of those mothership kind of things from the secret space program, you know. But I'm really, to be honest, I'm really not sure. What I do know, what I do believe, is that after that thing was seen, that the Air Force obviously knew what it was, and they didn't seem particularly threatened by it because they weren't chasing it, and they weren't really doing anything about it, which makes me think that it might have been part of the secret space program. But when they claimed that they were dropping flares, I think they did that after the fact to cover up what all those people had seen, because you can't tell me that all those people didn't see what they saw. So my gut instinct is that it was part of the secret space program, because I believe that the secret space program has existed for a very long time, at least since the 50s, but if not earlier. But I can't say that with 100% certainty.
Let's get to Sita's question. Or actually, before I do that, I want to get to this question here in regards to what do you think then of actor Kurt Russell coming out recently saying that he was the one who first reported the Phoenix Lights. He is the pilot that no one knew about who reported it to the air control towers.
You know, that's totally possible. I mean, you know, he's a person. I love Kurt Russell. I'm a big fan of you know, a lot of the movies he made. I think he's a great actor. You know, I've been watching him since the kid was at the computer wore tennis shoes. But you know, he's a person, and if he was flying along and saw something bizarre, you know, he's supposed to report it to the control tower, so he did. And I would imagine that he was probably as confused as everybody else. Being a Hollywood star doesn't mean that, unless you're Jackie Gleason, being a Hollywood star doesn't mean you have any special information.
I got to tell you right now, and I'm kind of going to go off topic here. Olav, I don't know if you've heard my story about Carl the alien.
No.
Who showed up at my window during the broadcast of April 20th, 2015. I got to tell you, it's very rare that I get this feeling, but I actually have a feeling right now that I'm being watched. And I'm looking out my window right now, and if you saw my arms and the back of my neck, it is all goosebumped right now. It's kind of eerie.
Wow.
It is kind of eerie. And it feels like the same energy right now as when Carl the alien was at my window. And I'm just staring at my window right now looking for any movement whatsoever, but I'm getting such a reflection from the lights on here, I just can't see it. So
switch them off.
Well, I can't because I got to do the show. And
Oh.
the light switch is over there. You don't understand. The light switch is over there. But this is just a weird feeling, man. Weird feeling.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a lightning rod. I don't really talk about it very often, but I'm a lightning rod that I've had in my 42 years of existence. Maybe because I chase it, maybe because I'm consumed by it, that I seek this stuff out. But I've had a lot of weird experiences, not just with UFOs or, I've seen Bigfoot, I've seen ghosts, I've interacted with ghosts, I've had hell of experience with ghosts. I'm truly a Fortean, but I'm after that weird thing. So, and for whatever reason, some people, they spend their whole, I was talking to Dean Hanglin, the guy who was in The Lone Gunman, and he was telling me, he's like, I've always wanted to see a UFO, but I've never seen one. And it's like, oh, I've seen a lot of them, ones that I think are alien. I saw a green vortex that looked like the thing from Stargate hanging in midair. And I saw lights going in, but not coming out the other side. I saw a hangar door open on Mount Adams. It looked like a garage door opening on the side of the mountain. I've seen all kinds of weird stuff. I don't know. I just seem to attract it. So I'm not surprised.
You know what? Honestly, these goosebumps that I have right now, and I'm not trying to make fake radio here or anything. I think I've earned that with my audience. Okay, that they know that I'm not BSing or anything. But honestly, these damn goosebumps will not go away.
Like I said, I'm a lightning rod. I don't talk about it very often, but it's true. People have reported weird stuff when I'm on the radio.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm just actually talking, okay, so I have a remote viewer coming in, or astral traveler coming in to look right now, and one of our guest tomorrow night, Ronald Keith Andrews, who we do a show called the ET Connection, he says, he is saying right now that, yes, there is something outside right now. And he's like, really?
I'm not surprised.
He's like, you're surprised by this? Well, damn it, Carl. Come on in. Come on in.
I've never seen an alien, but it wouldn't surprise me if I do someday. And people get me all wrong. I've done a lot of research to show that most of the things that we see are human, right? But I really like J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée. Those guys, these are scientists. They're mathematicians, physicists, astronomers, and it's like 10% of the stuff that you see is patently not explainable. And in my life, about 10% of it is patently not explainable. So I do believe that there are aliens. I don't think that you can ascribe human logic to what they're doing. I do believe people get abducted. I think most of it's Moab, but I do believe some people do get abducted. And we don't know why.
I thought something moved at the window, but it was a moth. Honestly,
maybe it's the Mothman.
Well, he's pretty damn small if he is, because it's only...
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I just got this eerie feeling right now, and it's really, really cool right now.
Well, they like you.
I'm in this catch-22 because I do want to go look, but I can't right now, because I'm kind of preoccupied. So I'm putting out the energy right now. Carl, if you're there, because I'm feeling something here. Carl, if you're there, you got to wait 26 minutes, okay, because I'm kind of busy right now. All right? Honestly, I'm kind of busy right now.
Come on, Carl. Come on, Carl.
Come on, Carl. I'm actually standing up right now, looking out the window. I'm actually holding my microphone. This damn reflection.
Like I said, I'm a bit of a lightning rod. I don't talk about it because it's like sometimes if you want to talk about that kind of stuff, it detracts from the other things that I do. But I've seen all kinds of weird stuff, and I don't know if it's because I chase it or if it just comes to me or what. But I've seen all kinds of weird things.
Oh.
Scary, not scary. But listeners out there, if you want to see this stuff, it's not necessarily about putting vibes out there or anything like that. If you want to see this stuff, you just have to look. It's out there. You just go somewhere like you said, where you know that they see that stuff, and you're going to see something. But go and look for it. You don't need to shine flashlights in the sky or pay $1,000. Go out in the desert. Get some night vision gear. Go out in the desert. You'll see something. You'll see something you can't explain. It's out there. You just have to want to see it.
Well, I can tell you this. It's a positive feeling. It doesn't feel negative. And I've been around negative and I've been around positive. It doesn't feel negative. It's just, it's a feeling right now of that heightened anticipation, like you're about to see a long-lost love or something like that.
Or you're about to put your hand on an electric fence.
No, not that kind.
That's the way it is. Well, it's like that for me. That when I think something's going to happen, I get a jitter, like an electrical jitter.
Yeah, I actually I had one of those that shaking, like that, after you have a good pee type shaking, I did have that moments ago, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not seeing anything out my window, but the energy is there right now, man. The energy is there. This is kind of exciting. So if I all of a sudden disappear, guys, I've gone on a ride.
Well, it could be an ultra-terrestrial.
Is that like the Ultimate Warrior?
It doesn't mess around. No. I'm the Ultimate Warrior. I used to watch WWF when I was a kid.
Me too.
No. An ultra-terrestrial is more like it's this idea that they're not aliens; they're just from other dimensions. They're like transdimensional. They could be from the Earth, but the Earth in some other dimension.
Could be.
Yeah.
Just weird. It's calming down a little bit now. It really is. It's calming down now. But
this is one that's fun. When I used to be the producer of Ground Zero, and one of the things that I really took delight in when I produced Ground Zero was it's a radio show. I was always a very big advocate of not just sitting in the booth talking about stuff, but actually try to do things. Because you have this big audience, you have people who are interested. It's like, try to manifest something. One time it's a radio station, so we put out something on a subcarrier, a specific like harmonic tone. And when we did that, we had people from he's mostly in Portland, but we had people from all the way from the Canadian border into California who listened to the show either online or on the radio, reporting that like their TVs were turning on, they were seeing stuff in their TVs, ghosts were manifesting. It's like, that's exciting, and it shows you that things are happening and it involves the audience. And so I'm always a big proponent of this kind of stuff. But if something's happening, when we had people calling in during mass UFO sightings and all kinds of things, and it's like it gives another dimension to radio. I think it really makes it exciting, But you have to be a good radio host like you are, where the audience knows that you're not trying to pull a fast one. So they know you really are sitting in a room right now, freaked out that there's a alien outside, walking around your backyard.
And trust me, I want to go out there. If it's Carl, he owes me one. He owes me one, and I've been waiting over 2 years for this. Okay, so I've just picked up the astral traveler who is in my house. Okay, so I've got him.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I just picked him up. So, because I just messaged Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal, and I said, is your guy here yet? It feels like he is, and he gave me the name of Tony. So I've worked with Tony before. So
okay, that's neat.
We'll see if he can pick things up here. So
I've always been fascinated by astral projection. I've never been able to pull it off. Using the Ingo Swann's books.
Yes.
I was able to remote view once, but I've never pulled off astral projection. The remote viewing I did achieve it one time, and that was weird. That was very strange.
Well, I can tell you this: if you're interested, I can get Eric to give you a contact, because his team, Forest Moon Paranormal, is actually in October going to be holding a free astral travel course.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And these guys, this team that he has, they are immaculate. I was talking to a regular guest on this show, Ian Holt, who's a writer, a movie director out of New York, and he actually had Cooper's team come to his house. And when I was talking to him today, he's like, you know your buddy Eric from Forest Moon Paranormal? He goes, that guy's team is amazing. He goes, I haven't had any paranormal experiences since his team came in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they do everything by astral travel. It's pretty cool.
Well, I have some targets.
Absolutely.
I have some targets. They need targets. I got targets.
Well, you know what? I'm going to get, and I know Eric's listening here, so I'm sure he will reach out to you. So if you hear from Eric after the show, it will definitely, it will definitely be, very good. So this is just very interesting, to say the least.
It's neat. It's good. It's neat.
It is. Live radio, man. Yeah. Live radio. This is where it happens.
Nothing like it.
Maybe this is the show that finally gets us on the map. Carl's showing up again. I'm standing out, looking out my window again. Yeah,
gotta get a photo of Carl.
I'll tell you, when I was face to face with Carl, we were about 7 feet away when that incident happened, and to look out my window and have my eyes focus on the big black eyes and then the gray head, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I just recognize the feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get to the point when you've had that experience, you recognize the feeling.
Well, I know how I felt when I saw Bigfoot. The kind of, but I saw him at a huge distance. But still, there's a feeling that you can't describe when you're seeing something that's not supposed to exist.
Exactly.
There's a kind of euphoria. Yeah.
Yes. I had the same feeling when I had my Bigfoot experience, too. We saw 2 of them within 100 feet of us.
Yeah, I wasn't that close. I was miles away.
But they are an impressive creature.
Oh, yeah. I watched 2 of them for over an hour climb up a snowfield at, God knows how many miles. But I watched 2 of them hike up a snowfield. It was insane. You can't, it's like coming head to head with a ghost. I went, there's a airplane museum in Oakland, California, the Western Aerospace Museum. Everybody should go if you are ever in Oakland. And because they have the plane that they used for the Pan Am Clipper from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
They actually have the plane. You can sit in the same seat. It's cool. But anyway, around Halloween, they open it up and because supposedly it's in a hangar that's supposedly haunted. And, I was like, maybe it's haunted. But I went out there and, I had my SB7 and I was getting SB7, people talking to me and the whole thing. And I went to this one particular room where they had a display for this old airline that used to operate out of Oakland. And I'll be damned if I didn't see an arm. There's literally like an arm appear out of midair. And it was like it was writing down on a desk. And it was an arm in midair. I'll be damned if I could tell you what that was. And it turns out that room used to be the office for the hangar. And supposedly it was haunted by the guy who was the manager of the hangar. And apparently I saw his arm writing notes on the desk. But it was an absolute arm. And then another time we did an investigation. I used to write for a newspaper here at weird stuff, because it's a very paranormal place around San Francisco. It's very strange. There's a lot of conspiracy and paranormal stuff here. And it just has like weird mojo. And I got them to open up the office. It's in this really old building. And because the guy who had been the editor of the newspaper was one of the people that was fingered as a Zodiac killer. And so we did an investigation live on the air, on the radio show, trying to communicate with this guy. And on an SB7, the spirit box thing, on an SB7, my friend Clyde asked me, he said, well, are you the Zodiac? And then clear as a bell, the guy came back and said, yes, I am the Zodiac. And then around the same time, I have a friend who's a bit of a mad scientist type, and he had built EM field generators, and we had put them in the drop ceiling above us because there was like shadow people and weird stuff up there. And so we had put these EM generators up there to try to boost the electromagnetic field up there to get them to manifest. And we heard this thud, and we sent him up there, and it turns out that one of the EM field generators exploded. I mean, it literally exploded. Like the parts just went all over the place. We had flashlights turning on and off. We had footsteps, mumbling. I mean, it was crazy.
All right, one of my psychic friends, Robert, says 30 feet from the window, I am getting shivers down my back. That's pretty much where I was thinking it was too.
Crazy.
It is. It's a little insane. And Robert, you also asked a question a few minutes ago if my implant was pulsing, and I responded to you no, but I'm going to tell you right now, yes, my implant in the back of my head is pulsating right now.
Oh, you have an implant?
I do. I did
not know that.
I woke up on the table. See, this is why you need to have me on your show one time. I got lots of cool stories. I want to have
you on my show.
I got lots of cool stories too. On. Absolutely. Except the problem is you're on the same time I am.
Oh, we can. Yeah, but it's a podcast. We can do it whenever. We can do it on the weekend.
Absolutely, man. Weekends are good. I can make time for you. I can make time. We only got about 8 minutes left. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go?
You woke up on the table?
I did.
You woke up on the table.
Yeah, 3 little gray dudes.
That's like some Travis Walton stuff going on there.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. I actually woke up to the feeling of little fingers running through my hair. And that's
when we're off the air, I will tell you a story.
Uh-oh. Yes.
I'll tell you a story. I won't do it on the air, but I'll tell you a story.
All about the aliens, man. I'm into it.
Well, like I said, I've always maintained that at least 10% of the things that we see, are alien in origin. And I've always believed that it's more anthropological or biological in nature. That, You know, the way, like with the implants, you know, you have one in the back of your head, right? You know, everybody's, what are they? What are they? You know, to me personally, like based on everything that I've seen and experienced, you know, I think that those, I see an equivalency of those implants being like when I used to watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and Marlon Perkins would be up there with the tranquilizer rifle and the helicopter and those old Hughes helicopters, you know, chasing some buffalo. And they'd tranquilize one of the buffalo, and they go down there, they put a little radio transponder in there. You know, I think that that's what those implants are doing, that they're relaying biological telemetry to something else. I don't discount it at all. I think that we blame everything on aliens, and I think that that's not right. But I do believe in them, absolutely.
It's so much fun to blame aliens, though. It's so much fun to blame aliens.
But it's the easy answer, and it cheats us. It cheats us of the technical capabilities that we truly have.
Right.
You know, that as humans we are capable of inventing this stuff ourselves. You know, and I mean, I think there probably is some level of back engineering. I don't think it's on the scale. I don't think that it's on the scale of what some people say. But, you know, my favorite UFO documentary in the world is the Outer Space Connection. You know, Alan Landsberg, Ron Sterling. It's like the original, you know, you know, Ancient Aliens documentary, shot in 35 millimeter. I mean, it's beautiful. I love that one. I love In Search Of.
So with 7 minutes left, you know what this means, Olav? We're going to have to get more into the secret space program here soon.
Sure.
You know what? I got one date left in September right now. One date. And it's a Tuesday, the 26th. Could we bring you back that night? Okay. I'm penciling you in. There, my month is done. You just made my month.
And for your listeners, you know, before I come on, you know, if you want to do some research, go look up Project Horizon and Project Lunex. And the M Project. That'll be some things that they can look up. And Alternative 3. I think it's all originates from a thing called Alternative 3. So we can really get into the nuts and bolts of that.
Excellent. Well, make sure you got the Tuesday the 26th on your calendar.
Oh yeah, just email me and I'll put it in the calendar.
All right.
I'll forget, so you have to email.
Yeah, I'll email you. I always keep you in touch with it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't even know where to go now, man. This kind of rattled me.
No, that's good. That's good though. It takes the show in a new dimension.
My audience is ripping
now
you.
Everybody's waiting to see if you see him.
Well, my audience is ripping you a little bit because you're holding out on that story for us. Well, just remember, he might not be able to tell it on the air.
No, I can't tell it on the air.
All right.
You know what? I have to keep some secrets, or I'm not mysterious.
Right.
I'll tell you almost everything, but there are certain things that I can't. Like someday I may tell this story, but not today.
That's okay.
I don't have enough time in 7 minutes to tell it anyway.
I hear you. Well, you know what? The main thing is we have the ability to communicate and bring these stories together. And the importance of these stories, whether it's the feeling that I just got a little while ago, or whether it's true communication or contact or whatever you want to call it, you know, the main thing is we talk about it, and we talk about it with an open mind and an open forum, so that way, you know, you're not crapping on anybody, you're not shooting down their feelings or their experiences, because in the end, we're all here to learn. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I, you know, as a researcher, I don't discount anybody's stories. You know, tell me the story and then let me figure it out. Right? Let's hear the story and then let's figure it out together. And maybe it is what you think it is. Maybe it's not. But, you know, it's a process of discovery. And, you know, if I had to end the show on one note, this is probably it. You know, there are so many people in ufology and conspiracy theory that say, you have to believe me. I'm a whistleblower. I know all these people, and they're telling me stuff. It's like, then show me something. If you think that there are orbs in the sky that are populated by aliens, show me something. If you were a member of the secret space program, show me something, right? That it, you know, don't just tell me to believe you just to tell me to believe you. It's like, I think that we as researchers now, and maybe the passing of Jim Marrs is the catalyst, because he really was a researcher. We need to take it back and to make it more nuts and bolts, and to get away from just claiming things, and to have at least some kind of evidence or some sort of a path or some reason that's demonstrable. When I come on your show, I can defend anything that I say. You may think that I'm absolutely nuts, but I can still defend it, right? You may not agree with me, but I can at least give you a line of logic of why I believe it. And I think that's important. I think that as researchers, and we're all researchers. You're a researcher. Your listeners are researchers. We're all on a journey, right? And ask yourself, does it make sense? What I'm hearing doesn't make sense, and look the stuff up, and don't just believe somebody because they tell you to. There's too much of that floating around, and it's bad. It's bad for all of us. You need to actually investigate.
I want to ask one quick question out of the Revolution Radio chat room by Man Olive. He is saying, Olav, have you ever read the book trilogy of The Unknown by Michael X and Timothy Green Beckley?
Yes, I've read some of it. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Tim Beckley. Tim Beckley is an awesome guy. I love that guy so much. But yes, I've read some of it. I've read some of Michael X's other stuff, the Rainbow City, and a lot of the Inner Earth stuff that he wrote. I've read that too. I have a bit of a fascination with the Inner Earth.
I haven't read a book in so long, man. I'm just dying to read a book.
You got to get on it.
You know what, though? I can't. I made a promise. As sad as that sounds, and as stupid as that sounds, I made a promise that any books in this type of field I wouldn't read. So literally, because before I had my Close Encounter of the Third Kind, and then my Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind 5 days later, 3 weeks before that, I don't know if it was a dream or I was taken into the room, and they basically told me, we don't want you doing that anymore. And
reading?
Reading books on these subjects. And I've held that bargain. And
it does give you, as crazy as it sounds, it does give you a unique take on it, though, because you're not clouded by any particular person's point of view. That because you haven't read it, it's new to you, or your beliefs are based on your beliefs. So
Absolutely.
You're not. I've read so much. I mean, it can directionally impact your belief system.
Absolutely.
So I understand the logic. I understand the logic of it.
Olav, I got about 30 seconds for you to fill us in on where people can find more information about you, the Secret Space Program, and Paranoia Magazine.
ParanoiaMagazine.com, ParanoiaPublishing.com. We're on Facebook, Paranoia. We're on Instagram, Paranoia Mags. We're on Twitter, Paranoia Mag. And I think that's it. Oh, and we do have a podcast. Check it out. It's all on ParanoiaMagazine.com. We have cool shirts for Camp Paranoia and Paranoia. We reprint books, and check us out. Oh, we're also on shortwave.
Excellent.
We're on 60, 70 kilohertz Sundays, 8 p.m. UTC to 9 p.m. UTC. If you like shortwave.
Olav, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. You're already booked for September 26th because we're going to do this again. We got to finish this conversation, but you hold on. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL playing in the background. Little brother is watching. Yes, Bumblefoot is the official sound of Spaced Out Radio. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time, our Keith Andrews is back with the ET Connection. It happens the first Friday at every month right here at spacedoutradio.com. Want to say thanks to my team, Everett Thiemer, Eric Markham from The Encounter Online, Tim Doyle, Jolene Lammers, Web Design, Bob Davis, our great announcer, Kim Gandy, our Director of Business Management, Catherine James, Social Media, and all of you who make this show possible. Thank you so much. It really makes it worth your time and mine to come hang out with all of you, and I'll give you my best every single night. On that note, my friends, keep spreading the word, because together, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home.